exercise here in case we're running behind.
Let's start the next session.
Bueno, comencemos la siguiente sesión, la sesión número 6. Y voy a pedir amablemente al técnico que nos la muestre en la pantalla. Y tengo que encontrar mi pointer.
Okay, data collection and measurement. Did everyone came back from the break? I have to say, the coffee here is so good that yesterday I had too much. And it seems a little bit stronger than the one we get in Poland, even if it's Colombian. So today I have to be careful. Anyways. So we will be talking very briefly about identification of emission sources, data collection strategies, and we will have a practical exercise, sample emission calculation, just very simple calculation. Once you do it once, you will know how to do it. And the following session is the panel, and after the panel we have the game. And during the game you will be using the knowledge, amongst other, that you will gain during this this session. So the general process of data collection is the following. First, we identify the sources, right? We look around what is using energy, what is using water, where do we have refrigerants, and so on. Second is we select calculation approach, which standard we want to follow. We collect the data, we choose emission factors, we always write down the sources of emission factors and so on, references. Of course, there are factors provided on different levels. I will be talking a little bit more later on. We apply the calculation and consolidate the data into a report. What are the typical sources in a company? Anything that is connected with combustion of fossil fuels, so stationary combustion, it would be boilers, heaters, and so on. Mobile combustion, it's connected with transportation, typically cars, airplanes, ships, buses, forklifts. Process emissions, so these are any production-related, process-related activities from production lines and so on, whether these are physical or chemical emissions connected with chemical reactions, for example, and it can be from production of aluminum, smelting, cement calcination, from production of products you're just using, for example, electricity in the production line. And then there are also fugitive emissions, which are in general some kind of leakages, right? And as I said, one of the worst leakages on the, let's say, company level very often might be leakages of refrigerants. But it can be also over-fertilization in an agriculture company, leakages from methane gas pipes, and so on. Once we know the sources, we of course define align them to the scope 1 and 2, and 3 would be in the portfolio in your case, right? I think I don't have to repeat what scope 1, 2, and 3 is, hopefully. And then in the, what is it? This is the greenhouse gas protocol. In Annex D, you will find a lot of guidance on the sectors. So if you have a company from a given sector, you can actually go to the Annex D. And the annex is much longer than that. I just copied half of the page from the annex to show you how it's constructed. So you have the subsector, you have and you have scope 1, 2, and 3. These are examples of emission sources that are typical for this sector. This makes it easier for an institution from this sector to actually define the emission sources. Okay. I will not be going through these examples, okay? This is very sector specific, so yeah. Again, you just do an inventory of the emission sources by activities. For example, heating of the building, electricity consumption in the building, use of cars in the company, and so on. Then you apply which scope it is, then align the measurement approach. I will be talking about the measurement approach in a second. And then you provide the activity data. At the end of the day, of course, it needs to be provided in tons of CO2 equivalent per year. Yeah? And this way you build an inventory. And then you can, from this inventory, you can create a report sorted by scope, so sorted by different types of activities and so on. If you have any issues with the defining the activities, defining the measurement approach, looking into activity data, how to get them, remember about the guidance notes, either if it's in ISO, in the annexes, or GHG protocols in the what they call publications, I believe, or annexes, or there are also different industry association data and other agencies that you could possibly use as a source, although please be careful when you're using some proxy data, and I would highly disadvise using any AI tools, you know, ChatGPT and so on. It is well known from just lying or making up stuff, so you don't want to risk, right? So be careful. I was playing around a little bit with the ChatGPT and asking questions that are easy to Google out, and it was not providing the proper answers. So there's something wrong with this tool, and it might be useful for some particular application, but for sure for this is not good. We don't want to risk it. So different strategies. I mean, of course, you need to align the strategy to a particular scope. You know, scope 1 and 2, as I said, from my point of view, is quite easy. Typically, most of the data you will have in the accounting, because there are invoices for the electricity, there are invoices for the natural gas, there are invoices for coal, for fuel used, and some, let's say, invoices for maintenance of cooling technologies, where you have refilling of refrigerants, right? So you can actually draw most of this data from accounting, from the invoices. Then when it comes to scope 3, when it's about the portfolio, then you need to kind of request your clients if they are able to provide you with the emission data, or at least the activity data. So whether they are able to provide you with tons of CO2 or maybe kilowatt hours of electricity used, and then you can kind of aggregate the data. And then when it comes to different other scope 3 emissions, which might be connected with cars that you lease out, you need to know how much kilometers the employees did, right? When it comes to airplanes, airplane travel, also you need to track the kilometers done by employees in the airplanes. When it comes to footprint of the products and sub-products you're using, you also need to ask your suppliers for that. But for you as a financial institution, obviously the Scope 3 emissions are mostly about your portfolio and any travel-related activities. What are the data sources? Of course, putting aside the clients, right, of financial institutions, we also can use national sources, national statistics. I use them very often, although in many countries where I had a pleasure to work, the statistics are not there or are kind of not published every year. So then we need to look into other sources like sectoral experts, sector agencies. In few occasions, I also went to a library to read a little bit, especially when it comes to agriculture, where I didn't have too much experience at the beginning. There are also national greenhouse gas inventories, which might be a source of good data. And of course, national data that the country collects for the United Nations Framework Convention, right? So there are kind of underlying documents that sometimes are published, and they very often go into sector level information, and they are also a good source of information. On the international level, obviously IPCC, emission factor database, there is a website. If you Google IPCC emission factor database, you can enter and see emission factors there. There are also a very good source of data very often is the World Bank database about sector emission or energy intensity, for example. You can find it out. In Europe, we use Eurostat very often. Also, International Energy Agency has a lot of publications that might be very helpful. OECD has a lot of data. FAO, which is Food Agriculture Organization. And sometimes there are some interesting documents from IMF that I also used in the past. And also the last resort, some scientific papers, but I found that the donors are getting more reluctant to base on a scientific paper that we read, right? Because this one paper might not be very objective. But it also happened that I was using some scientific papers from some portals that make it much easier to report. What if we don't have the data? What if the client doesn't provide us with tons of CO2, for example? Then, of course, we need to use what's called surrogate or alternative data. You need to remember that they must be relevant, they must be in line with good practice, and you need to document the source of it for the transparency and for the auditing. Because it might be the best piece of data. If you don't have supporting documents, they are worthless, yeah, unfortunately. And sometimes, but this doesn't happen too often, to be honest, we just ask clients to do the measurement, for example, of electricity consumption of a particular asset, and then we have very good data, but this doesn't happen too often because it actually raises the costs and kind of it's very often too much of a hassle. And again, when we talk about smaller SMEs, this is hard to do, but if we go towards bigger companies, for example, we can actually expect them to do that. Very often the big companies have, maintenance officers, engineers that are responsible for energy issues, for example, and then they are capable to do some measurements, right? So when it comes to adapting the data, you need to remember that the data should kind of be relevant and provide full coverage of this particular activity. They need to be consistent. They need to fill in the gap that is there. And you need to be kind of confident about this data. Jonas yesterday mentioned greenwashing and green hashing, right? So I'm telling you need to be confident to the level of, being reasonable, right? It's better, and you can always ask some experts, right, if these data are okay. And also verify your report that will support this data, right? But I wouldn't be, if you do everything right, according to the protocols, according to the standards, you should not be scared to do the reporting, right? If you are transparent, you talked about the standards you use, assumptions you use, exclusions you used, maybe you mention logic of not using some data and so on, then it's better than not reporting. I really think that taking the first step makes you more comfortable with the situation, and it will help you to take the next steps. When it comes to measurement or data collection, there are different ways, as I mentioned. So, of course, first is the direct measurement of greenhouse gases, which doesn't happen too often. Only in big facilities, big production lines, big companies do it on the level of particular installations. I would say there are no companies that actually measure all of their CO2 emissions across everything that they do. It's just impossible, right? They would have to put a CO2 measurement device on the tailpipe of the car even, right? So this doesn't happen. But on the level of installations, this happens. And if you're providing finance to a big installation, you could possibly kind of ask them, especially when it's concerning some fossil burning chemical processes and so on. It's possible to measure the greenhouse gases from the exhaust gases. Then stoichiometric calculation. So if we know how much coal we add to the boiler, we assume that the boiler has a certain efficiency. We can actually calculate how much CO2 was emitted, and this is also a good way to do that. And then the most commonly used way is the estimation. So we know how much kilowatt hours of electricity we used, and we use the grid emission factor, and we get the CO2 emissions, right? And I also mentioned about tons of steel produced, so there are sector factors, and again, we can estimate the emissions. Emission factors. Yesterday we were talking about global warming potential. So again, when you're preparing the report, you need to refer to this for clarity, and you need to point out which one you used. And there are also emission factors from, amongst others, IPPC, that you can use when it comes to different types of, especially fuels, fossil fuels, and so on. And they talk about how much CO2 comes from 1 kilogram, 1 cubic meter of burning of a particular fuel. Okay. Emission factor hierarchy method. So, of course, we would like to use location-based factors. So when we talk about grid emission factor, in Poland, where I live, or in Jordan, where I have one of the projects, we use one emission factor because in general the grid is kind of, there is one grid basically, right? But I can imagine there are countries where the grid is not connected between different regions. So these different regions might have different grid emission factors. Some regions might have, for example, only fossil fuel energies. Some others might have renewable energy because there is a water dam, for example. So this averaging out this emission factor would not be very fair and would kind of lead to under or overestimation of CO2 emissions. But of course, using national production emission factors is also fine. And then if we don't have it, and I did find some countries where the emission factors from the grid even are very old, and the donor didn't agree to use them, then we need to use some market-based information and provide the supporting information under that, and then we can report. How do we do the reporting? Yesterday someone was asking how the tool works. So this is the very complicated equations that are under all the emission calculation tools. So we have the activity data times emission factor. We get tons of emissions, and remember, these might be different emissions, so CO2, methane, and so on. Then we take these tons of emissions, multiply them by appropriate global warming potential, and we get the carbon dioxide equivalent of emissions. As I said, it's not really hard. As bankers, you can do that, right? The challenge is in getting this activity data, right? Are there any questions? If not, we would have the group work. I would kindly ask maybe Christine to support me in splitting somehow the group. I've foreseen 3 groups, but we can have 6 groups, right? Somehow. It's a very short.
Yeah, it's very short, so maybe we make here, to make it not too complicated, group 1. You are group 2. Maybe you can go here, then we have group 3, calculating. Then maybe you can make group 4, and we make here group 5, group 6, and then we make here group 7, where you can maybe join.
Okay, so group 1, group 3, group 2, group 3. Group 4, Group 5, Group 6, Group 7. Everyone saw it?
You have the advantage, you can ask Mustafa for support, and you no. So
Okay.
you will again take number group 1.
This is a very, very simple calculation. Please don't be offended. Write down the data you need. I can go back to the equations if you missed them. I remember one of them was tricky.
So just to maybe explain, so the different groups have the different tasks here,
Yeah.
and the task you have to do is first to provide like the type methodology, whether it's location-based or market-based, then to calculate the steps, and finally the CO2 emission. Is it clear? How many minutes? 5?
5.
5.
Yes? This is the tricky one. Wait. It might be that there's a methane. But it's just, I have the solution, so. Well, where? Two separate equations, right? Yes. Electricity consumption.
Oh, perfect.
So, yes? Wait, because they are. Okay. Yes? Yes.
Have the pen and everything on time.
Okay, so did everyone calculation? For clarity, these were two separate equations, right? Two multiplications. And I want to say tomorrow. Today we are playing a game which will be a little bit more complicated than that. And we will use the tool provided by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which you can download. And the tool is an Excel file, so that you can see the Excel file, use it for a series of such calculations concerning your organization. Okay? Hello, hello. Okay. Okay. I hope you finished. No, wait. Sorry. Okay, sorry. The rookie mistakes. Okay. First, we want to hear the group 1, 4, and 7 about your outcomes. Now I need the paper. Okay. Okay. Okay.
What are the results of group 1?
Uh, 0.23 tons carbon equivalent.
Okay.
Then let's check. What's the result
No,
of...
let's listen to the 4th
Yeah,
and
exactly.
7th.
What is the result of group number 4? Also market-based and 2 point...
Okay.
0.2.
How much? 0.
But you said? They said 2.3. 0.23. Ah, okay.
Okay, and the 7th group? Sorry, I need to. I'm half deaf. 2, what? One more time. 0.23. I have to check. What? Yeah, okay. Okay, now the group 2, or are we, no, let's look into the solution. No, it's different slides. Okay, and of course I made a mistake. It's always fun when someone that teaches makes a mistake.
Exactly. He just made for 1,000 liters.
Yeah. I was overestimating the fuel consumption.
It was a long trip.
Yeah. So what's the proper solution? Because now I am confused. Okay. So I might not, so there is 100 liters. And of course, there's one thing. I made a mistake. 100 liters of fuel doesn't weigh 100 kilos, right? When we have a spill of fuel or oil on the ocean, it floats, so it's lighter, right? So we have 100 liters, and we have the emission factor in tons of CO2 per liter. No, that's fine. Okay, sorry. Sorry, now I'm confused, okay? So times 0.0023. Okay. So of course the teacher made a mistake, and the proper answer is 0.23. Okay. I learned in my studies that I remember the best when the teacher made a mistake. So that's one of the strategies, right? Or a nice way to go out of the error. Okay. I remember one of them was tricky, and I don't. Yeah. I prepared it a few weeks ago, and kind of. Okay, let's listen to the group 2 and 3.
Was it market or location based?
This data, where depending where the factor is coming, right? Right? It's market-based. We use the factors for fossil fuels from the market, right? Okay? Okay, group 2 and 3.
We assume the location-based methodology with the national electricity emission factor of Angola. And we calculated 39 tons of emissions and 819 carbon dioxide equivalent.
How much? Can you repeat?
819
Of what?
carbon dioxide equivalent
Okay.
in tons.
Okay. Okay, the other group is, no, not group 3, group 5. Ah. Which group is group 3? 5, sorry, 5. Your group?
Where's group 5? They left?
What? Okay. Fine. I wonder what they will do during the game. Okay, so now we have, so the answer. But what did you do with the emission factor from Colombia? You did? This is the emission factor.
So it's different data, you see? Again.
Again. Yeah, I was playing around.
But here everything is in gigawatts.
This is in gigawatts, this is in megawatts. So it's moved by 3 factors, right? Right? So we made a consistent mistake, but the answer is proper. Yeah. Right?
And
so what I wanted to show by this is that the emission factors are not always CO2 per something. There are emission factors concerning other greenhouse gases, right? Okay. Oh, sorry.
So
and now group
3 and 6.
3 and 6.
So group 6.
Okay.
Okay, the ton of emission CO2 is 619,000 tons of CO2 emission.
Okay, and the group 6?
3?
Oh, 3,
this is
sorry.
answer for 3 calculation, group 3 calculation.
Group 3 and the...
Okay.
Wait, we are missing 2 groups?
Okay, I think they were mixed up with which they calculated. So.
Okay. Okay, so let's look into the... Is this group 3?
Yeah.
So the data was CO2 emissions, use of purchased electricity, 1,000 gigawatt hours, emission factor 0.619, which is most likely the Polish one that I used. And the answer, and I was playing too much with the data. Sorry for this. But anyways, we had a different, I was switching countries actually. I was switching countries, so this is where we have the difference in the emission factor, right?
Factor is
I don't know if I used Colombia, moved to Poland, or used Poland, moved to Colombia, don't remember. But anyways, your answer is proper because you used the proper emission factor, which the answer is 619,000, right? Sorry for this.
As you said, they will remember.
Yeah, hopefully, or be more confused. But again, you will have a, such calculations are done typically by environmental specialists, engineers, when they are in need of this carbon dioxide emission data, right? As a financial institution, you would be rather gathering the data, right, and putting them into a proper tool. And one of the tools was presented yesterday, right? And today, during the game, we'll be using a tool that is available in form of an Excel file on the GHG protocol website, and this is free to use for everyone. And it has these calculations embedded. The Excel file allows you to choose the country. There are emission factors applied for the country already, and you just enter activity data, and at the end of the day, the file provides you with a report, which is very, very nice. Okay? Oh, Anna? Okay, so we make a break and... No. Okay. Okay, so we are kind of using the time a little bit differently than agenda allows. So let's move to the panel right now, and I hand over to Jonas.
Okay, good. Okay, we will set up, like we need 2-3 minutes to set up. So if you need to go to the washroom or get some water, please do so. 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and we meet here again, and then we will start with the first panel. Entonces invitamos a todas las panelistas que para presentarse aquí adelante. I'm sorry, please all the speakers for the next session, we kindly invite to the front. All right. Good. Then I think we're right on time, so we will continue with the next panel. Just okay. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay, we will continue with the first panel. Basically, the idea of the panel is really like that we give the opportunity to share experience, because there's already a lot of things happening in the different institutions concerning carbon accounting, and yeah, we would like to give like also the IDFC members as well as one external speakers the opportunity to provide their insights, to share their experience with you. Also, maybe like to give some food for thought for you, so that you can also take this examples also maybe back home, or directly also in the networking events which we have during the next, today and tomorrow, also like to directly get in touch with them and to follow up also on bilateral discussions. So you see, we have a quite big panel, so we have roughly an hour, so we will I will also monitor the timing, so each of you will have roughly 7 to 8, 10, max 10 minutes to present. Each of you has a presentation, and yeah, we would like to start with a guest. He just joined us in this session, in this panel. Juan Andrés López Silva. He's director at the Cabo Sostenible. I think he's based here in Bogota, correct? He's environmental specialist in the fields like value chains, climate change, carbon markets, CSR, energy, among others. Yeah, we're very happy to have you here, and yeah, we're really looking forward. Maybe you can kick off with your presentation. So I would kindly ask the technicians to start with the first presentation. Okay, can you move forward?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
This is again, if you have the panel again, but there should be another presentation.
Okay. Again. Yeah. Keep going.
They're still switching. So this is like the more an overall slide. So maybe before we have like the slides on the screen, maybe you can quickly introduce like what is Cabo Sostenible, what are the activities you're doing, before we then go a bit more into detail into your presentation.
Okay. Well, Cabo Sostenible is a carbon developer. I myself and my company have been involved in carbon markets and all sorts of environmental related markets for over almost 30 years now. Cabo Sostenible is very much developing projects, nature-based solutions for climate change. But my experience has ranged across many financial institutions. I was with the World Bank. I also worked for IDB at some point, IFC. This is like my day-to-day discussion for over 20 years now. So I'm gonna make it very, very quickly, because I understand this will be a very quick overview. So I have two questions. The first one is how carbon accounting methodologies across sectors help drive sustainable outcomes. And here, well, you probably have heard over these days, as I understand, the carbon accounting methodologies helps you take a picture of how your company or facilities are related to the emissions. No? What is your carbon footprint in the companies? And of course, this is a very powerful tool to help you place yourself in the competitiveness of the sector, or even to see how your business activity is doing. Also, it's very important if the government, as Colombia is probably doing in the coming years, is going to set goals or targets for emission reductions. So this, of course, this is the basis for finding the opportunities, challenges, and setting the strategies, as I say here, to survive, thrive, or grow. This is a very information-intensive exercise. So you'll probably have seen that basically you need to estimate what are your carbon emissions related to all your inputs, processes in your company and your supply chain. No? This includes the carbon footprint of all resources, including your traveling, your employees, commuting, etc. And then your outputs, how your products that are sold in the market are used, are disposed of, are transformed or processed if it's a raw material for other companies. And then you have other areas of potential carbon footprints, like investments you may be doing in some areas that are not related to your business or even the franchises. How to cope with all these information requirements, you know, and you probably have heard about this European directive that now every large company has to provide information on what is the carbon footprint of all the activities and goods. Then you have some tools like the greenhouse gas protocol and the scopes 1, 2, and 3, being the scopes 1 and 2, the easy ones, because are the ones related to your boundary, to your facilities. So what are your own emissions? No? So your energy that you're consuming in the facilities, what is the process, what is the emissions associated to the processes, and your own purchased energy. So if you acquire electricity from the grid, that energy that is related to your processes. And then the scope 3, which is the most difficult, because the scope 3 of your company is the scope 3 of the other companies, and at the end is the largest sum of emissions, and is where you don't have a control, but you can help mitigate or compensate those emissions. So, for example, if you're Volkswagen, if you sell cars, even if they're electric, depending on the usage, you may have emissions related to that. And that beyond all the materials and the process related to the vehicle is how they're used. It's beyond your reach. But then, if you want to be totally carbon neutral, you have to work hard in that area. Then you have the spend-based and the activity-based approaches for finding out your carbon footprint. The spend-based is very much used in the developed world. In Colombia, that's like really new, because this all depends on information from the different industries. Then you have tons of emissions per dollar spent in the different goods or services you acquire. It's a very good proxy if you don't have the information, especially for scope 3, but it's difficult to do it. And then the activity-based, which is the most regular, which is tons per kilowatt, or tons per gallon, or per kilo, etc. Well, then you have to take your decisions. Abatement costs is probably the way to define what you want to do to comply with your own set goal. And then, well, the conclusions, of course, this is in this first part is very important for doing all what I have said. I won't spend more time on that because I'm probably running out of time. Very quickly on the carbon markets, there are two basic type of markets: the voluntary ones, where you really want to please your constituencies, government or stockholders, and you just reduce emissions because you want to. That's what the CDM used to be. And then you have the regulated one, which is the cap and trade. This is going to take place in Colombia. So the government sets goals. They probably allocate emission permits to the different installations. Here we're not talking about companies, but installations. And as the years pass, the permits will be reduced, and then the companies will have either to reduce within their own shops the emissions because they acquire new technologies, or to acquire technology emission permits from third parties or carbon emission credits. This is basically, well, I don't know if I suppose I don't have much more time, but here is the slides you probably can see in with a bit more of of time, but this is the two type of emissions of carbon markets. And as I say here, of course, the carbon markets help you avoid, reduce, mitigate, or in the last term, compensate your own emissions. And probably every company will have to do a mixture of these four formulas. Well, this is all. Thank you very much.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. We will do it in this way that we will, you can maybe collect your questions. So we will have first the intervention of everyone, and then we open the floor for your questions, which you might have directly, then also to Juan and to the other colleagues as well. Thank you so much again. Please hand over and the control next to you, to Evelyn.
Good morning, everyone.
Maybe let me very briefly introduce you again. We have been introduced yesterday by your neighbor, but maybe very briefly again. So we were happy to have Evelyn Rodriguez on the panel. She's climate change specialist at CABE, and she has a degree in biology, psychology, social science, as well as master in climate change adaptation. And at CABE, she's basically looking forward how to mainstream and how to strengthen the topics of climate change, biodiversity institution, and as well as policies and regulations. So very happy to have you in the panel, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Jonas. So good morning, everybody. At CABE, we have been developing a software for GHG calculation for our funded projects. So that was being done 2 years ago. Last year, we didn't do that much with it because we're still trying to mainstream, as Jonas was mentioning, climate change on our regulations and policies. So how we can make this application that we have mandatory to be used within our internal processes and operations, and how at some point when we are currently also developing our climate change strategy as an institution, so how it can become an input for decision making through the use of this scope tool. So a little bit of the context in which CABE operates. So in 2016, CABE made a commitment to promote the goals of the Paris Agreement that was signed in COP21. Then in 2019, we had a zero carbon declaration made by our Governor's Assembly, which is the maximum authority for the bank. And in this one, we exclude financing of coal-related projects, and we also commit to promote climate change adaptation and mitigation funding. In 2022, we also made a commitment to the Glasgow Pact to continue with all the commitments from the UNFCCC agreements. So what is Neutral Bank? This is the name of our software. It's called Neutral Bank because we aspire at some moment to become a neutral bank. That's where the name came from. So it's a tool designed to quantify the GHG gases from the projects funded by CABE. It's based on the AFD carbon footprint tool. So we took some of the inputs from that tool and made a new one. This one has 31 types of projects, so we can run 31 type of projects that goes from solar energy, hydropower, vehicles. We also have water sanitation projects in there. We have agriculture. We use some from the FAO tool, data for that agriculture and forestry types. And it has at this moment more than 4,000 factors and ratios for emissions. So its functions, we're hoping to include them in the changes we're making in our policies and our normative for our internal processes. It's to have an assessment of our ex ante, or the absolute emissions that we aim to have with a project. Also, it will help us to estimate how much we can avoid emissions when we compare to a business as usual scenario without the project. estimate also what can be reduced with the project, and interact also. It's thought to have a component where our clients or the executive that deals with the client receive information during the monitoring and implementation phase can fill in the gaps yearly, so we can compare and see and track how the project is doing, if they are complying towards it was designed to, or if some measures can be done from the environmental and social supervision monitoring in a systematic way. And it can also generate some interactive reports and charts like the ones we were shown yesterday with the tool for IDFC. So we also have a dashboard included in our software. So it has a lot of relevance to monitor GHG in CAVE because it can improve our financing decision making at some moment in time, not at this moment, but we're hoping to get that maybe in 5 years or so when we are really implementing our climate change strategy that it's currently being developed, and we hope to have it approved this year or the next one. It will help us strengthen our institutional reporting capacity and transparency, and now that it's even more necessary and required by the financial institutions worldwide, and make us comply with the institutional goals that we have already set within our environmental and social strategy for the 5-year-old period that came from 2020 to 2024 that ends this year. And I'm sure we will have another goal for the next one, 5-year-old period, that we will have to comply, and it will help us to do so. And it will also strengthen our clients' capacities in terms of climate action and carbon footprint, which in Central American region, very low at this moment. And it's from the regulatory side, it's only being promoted by Costa Rica at this moment in time, but the other countries have to catch up, and this will be sometime something like a capacity strengthening and capacity building for our clients. And at this moment, in these last 2 years, we have used it to improve the tool and to make it to test for some demo projects. We have estimated as well the contribution of approvals that we have made in 2021 and 2022. We have calculated and reported avoided emissions through some projects that we have included in our ESG bonds emissions. And we also exchange some results and experiences for the MRB throughout the development of the tool in COP27 in Egypt. So that's it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now we're moving to a different region. We're moving from Latin America, we're moving now to Indonesia. Happy to have you here in the panel, Hani Wijayanti. I hope I pronounced it correct.
Yes.
Luckily, good. You're a safeguard specialist at the Environmental Social Evaluation team in the division at PTSMI, correct? And yes, and you work here especially focusing on renewable energy projects, right? Okay, good. So looking forward to hear from your experience from Indonesia. So stage is yours.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for introducing me. So this time, I want to share an experience about GHG counting implementation at PT Sarana Multi Infrastructure Persero. So PTSMI is one of special mission vehicle of the Indonesian government, which responsible to accelerate the infrastructure development in Indonesia. So in this business model, PTSMI infrastructure sector from toll road until the renewable energy. So we have many sectors to be financed by PTSMI. And then, yes, in environment, social governance, ESG milestone, we already started at 2016, and then we stimulate every year. And in 2023, we have several achievements here. And yeah, we also have environment social safeguard standard, which every project that financed by PTSMI has to be assessed by this 10 ESS standard. Yeah, this is our division had ESS team. So we are currently have 18 people who are responsible for each project, including the internal expert group. Yeah, this is our sustainability report. Since that PTSMI provide information to various stakeholders on the implementation of sustainable development. So PTSMI has published a sustainability report since the reporting period in 2017, which includes the calculation of GHG emission from the company operational activities. And then, as a PTSMI progressive learning process, the inventory of GHG in year 2023 has been verified in accordance with ISO 14064. And then from that calculation, we disclose that the emission of total PTSMI produced is 1,910 metric tons of CO2 equivalents. So this is GHG accounting procedure that PTSMI have, and it is currently approved and implemented since April 3rd, 2024. So it's very new for PTSMI to just account GHG accounting with the very detailed ways. So in this procedure, it's made a guide and standard for calculating GHG, which is consists of the first one is organizational boundaries. So we define that PTSMI as a control, and then reporting boundaries. So yeah, scope 1, 2, and 3, and then GHG emission inventory base year information. We define that the base year information for PTSMI is 2023 because yeah, at the time, PTSMI has already have a very detailed calculation and also have a GHG accounting procedures here. And the fourth one, GHG emission calculation, data and formulas, and then the last one is GHG emission calculation process. So this is the process of GHG counting at PTSMI. So as you see that in the screen, there is four steps that we have to complete. The first one is data collection, and then calculation, verification, and the last is submission of calculation data. So ESS team doesn't work itself because we have to coordinate with the other division or with the other department, which is General Affairs and Procurement Division. And then the second one, Technological Information Division. So with the data collection, ESS division submit the data requirement to the DTI, is it the Technical Information Division, and then the DUP, General Affairs and Procurement, and then DUP and DTI submit the data and move to the second phase, calculation. So ESS division will calculate all the data comes from the other divisions, and then we are verified by our team leaders. Also, for the needed of suitability report, we also use the verification process. So yeah, and then after the verification process done, we have to submission all the calculation data, either internal or external. Yeah, this is the coverage of PTSMI emission calculation. So for the category 1, direct GHG emission, emission from company fleet vehicle, fugitive carbon dioxide from fire extinguisher fuels, and fugitive hydrocarbon from the building access system. So which is include the direct emission in the left. And then the second one, category 2, indirect GHG emission associated with purchased electricity. And then the category 3, indirect GHG emission from business travel. Yeah, so we already define all the GHG emission from produced by PTSMI. the GHG accounting PTSMI year 2023, as we see in this chart, that the biggest one is come from the emission from the imported electricity. As our speaker before mentioned that in company building or administrative building, it's currently has a highest GHG from the emission from the imported electricity. And then the second one comes from emission from business travel, 38%. And then the third one comes from direct emission from mobile combustion. So then, and the last one is come from the direct fugitive emission. So this is the calculation. We have several working instructions. So actually currently we only have a manual in Excel form for those counting of GHG. This is the first one example working instruction Excel sheet that we have. For the first one, this is form for the counting GHG scope 1 from using the gasoline or for the gasoline. This is the second example. The form Excel that we use to counting the scope 1 from using the air conditioner. And this is also the example how we use the counting of the scope 3, which is the business travel. So it is a model, air short until the bus and the unit and then miles, and we have emission factors and GWP, and then we calculated with this methodology. This is GHG verification that we already have in the last month by two Friendland Indonesia. So there is no finding or material findings that they search for this verification. The challenge is from scope 3 that business travel. Actually, PTSMI already have a system or recorded system that including the cities, destination, modes of transportation. But when we have to fill in the form of Excel form, so we have to fill it in manual. So it's need a lot of time to be manually fill in the form. And then the second one, indirect emission from employee trips to the office. Actually, PTSMI have difficulty to calculating trips and distance travel, since that PTSMI still implements the hybrid working arrangement. So this is also the challenge for us. The third one is indirect emission from visitor and client. There is no detailed data on the number of visitors, clients who come to the company office, where they travel from, and what kind of transportation that they use. So this is kind of our challenges that we have to work on. From scope 4, we also face the challenge in emission from liquid solid waste disposal, since there is no data available to calculate liquid waste, and it is very insignificant amounts that we have. The second one is emission from asset use, no data available and suitable methodology for calculation yet. The last is scope 5, indirect emission related to the use of product from the company. Currently emission from investment of project financed by PTSMI has not been calculated yet due to the unavailability of data. Besides that we currently have a challenge also to make a lot of capability. Sharing experience or having a lot of learning process to our borrower or our debtors about this GHG accounting. I think this is it from us, for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We have already seen a lot of questions, challenges as well. Let's see how CAF is dealing with these challenges. We have directly two speakers and two different scopes of the presentations. First, we start with Patricia Rivera. She's Green Operations and Finance Officer at CAF. Her background is, as we have heard us yesterday as well, is in energy management, environmental science, industrial engineering as well. And I read that you lead the GHG inventory management and monitoring at the corporate level. So yeah, very much looking forward to your insights, and stage is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll go fast because I know we don't have much time.
Actually, we are quite good in time.
Yes?
So, yeah,
Oh,
your speakers we have had before did a very good job. So
okay, I want to give more time to Christian. Just kidding. Well, I'm here to talk to you about the GHG accounting of the easy sources, like you were saying, the easy ones, in the internal operation of the bank. Christian is going to talk to you about the emissions in the projects that we finance. But basically, in 2009, CAF estimated its emissions since its foundation in 1970. And from 2010 and onwards, it's been measuring and tracking its emissions through direct activity data using a software or a platform called Green Cloud. So we've been having this system through a while, some years. And every time that, the way that we make sure that the information is reliable is by tracking, that everything is being completed in a monthly basis, ideally, and we have different audits throughout the year. Just to say the inventory, it's built according to the ISO 14064. And once we have the final audit, let's say when everything is completed, then we also add a 5% margin in order to offset our emissions. CAF has the commitment of being carbon neutral in this type of sources of emissions. So we perform very exhaustive due diligence and evaluations to make sure that the projects that we choose are aligning to our strategy, to our purpose. For instance, we look for projects that are in the region, so we can support the countries in the region. Some numbers, we have been offsetting since 2023 around 191,000 tons. And the last year's emissions were around 12,000 tons of CO2, mostly like 80%. It's kind of different from my colleague here who just said, the main sources of emissions for us in the corporate level or internal level is air travel. Some difficulties have been, to really make sure that everyone in the organization is aware of its activities and the impact that it has on the environment, so we can actually make ambitious goals in terms of reducing of our emissions. I think that's it. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much for providing the overview. Now we, as you said, we go a bit more deep dive. Exactly. Yeah, wait a second.
Yes.
So again, we are second intervention from CAF with Christian Grisales. Also, we have introduced you yesterday as well, or you were introduced by your colleague as well. So again, Senior Executive, Climate Action and Positive Biodiversity Management at CAF. He's electrical engineer, so engineering background with a master in renewable energies. And among others, he's also a leading author and technical expert for validations and verifications of GHG emissions projects in regulated and voluntary carbon markets. Yeah, from your expertise, we would like to hear now, what is the carbon balance tool all about, and how are you going about it?
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
before starting with the presentation of the tool we have developed, just some pics of what implies for CAF to become a green bank in the Latin American and the Caribbean region. Firstly, green bank implies a bank that mobilizes green funding. Because of that, we are accredited entity of the Green Climate Fund, of the Adaptation Fund, and also with strategy allies like KfW, USTDA, French Agency for Development, mobilizing resources for projects with co-benefits in environment, adaptation, and so on. That's the first part. Also implies to be a bank that works green. That was what my colleague was explaining. The estimation of the greenhouse gas inventory, the compensation of the carbon footprint, and all the process behind of that. And finally, to be a bank that funds green projects. How we select those projects, we adopted a green taxonomy, and that taxonomy is categorized in the kind of projects of co-benefits included in those projects that can result in greenhouse gas emission reductions, or in climate change adaptation, or in the promotion, protection of biodiversity. Some examples: renewable energies, energy efficiency, waste management, transport efficiency in the transportation, also controlling of fugitive emissions in the oil and gas sector, and also in nature-based solutions like reforestation and conservation projects like the RED+. And well, our taxonomy not just includes the types of projects with those benefits, but also includes requirements of calculation. Isn't just to say this project is green because it's part of the positive list, including the green taxonomy, but also because we can calculate the greenhouse gas emission reduction resulting of the implementation of this project along the lifetime of the credit operation of the assets of the project. That calculation is based on the UNFCCC guidelines. Basically, we establish the baseline scenario for the project. Basically, what are the emissions in the absence of the project activity, and the project scenario, including the construction and operation emissions resulting of the implementation of the project. And we say that the carbon balance of that credit operation is positive if the project emissions are lower than the baseline emissions. That's basically we have emission reductions because of the implementation of the project, or the carbon balance is negative when the project emissions are higher than the baseline emissions. This also happens, for example, in roads, because of the characteristics of the Latin American, the Caribbean. We invest in roads, and maybe you know that when we are funding roads, we have something that's called the rebound effect because of the induced traffic. In that case, for example, we have project emissions higher than the emission reductions in spite of we implement along with the road, bicycle lanes, renewable energies, efficient lighting, and so on. So we are aware and we are transparent in informing to our stakeholders that also we have active projects funded with negative carbon balance. These are some visuals of the tool we have developed. You can see the main page of the tool with its name, Carbon Balance Tool, some of the projects that have been evaluated using the tool. You have to include some general information, basically who is performing the calculation, what's the name of the project, where it's located, what is the component of that credit operation implying greenhouse gas emission reduction, greenhouse gas emission reduction or removal, what is the component that is supporting adaptation, promotion, or protection of the biodiversity. And later we start with the inclusion of the activity data for the construction of the baseline. Those baseline scenarios are based mainly in the guidelines of UNFCCC, basically the booklet of methodologies of UNFCCC, of course tropicalized not including elements like additionality and so on, but including the elements necessary for the establishment of the baseline. So using those formula, we request to our clients the activity data for this particular example, fossil fuel consumption, what are the materials necessary during the construction, solar panels, transformer, cables, pipelines, and so on. We include those activity data into the tool, and we calculate the greenhouse gas emissions in the baseline scenario, and later we pass to the construction of the project scenario in two parts: the construction phase and the operation phase for the project scenario. Sorry. Also asking for the activity data required, trying to be as most complete as we can, because we know if we have much more information, the accuracy of the establishment of the project scenario will be better. So before starting with the operation, even during the pre-origination, we inform to our clients about we are going to request this information, if maybe it's required any additional resource for studies, pre-feasibility, and so on, in order to get this information at the time of the evaluation. And we finally have the balanced carbon for the operation, basically subtracting the project emissions from the baseline emissions, allocating them depending the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and the final carbon balance allocated to each of the greenhouse gas emission sources. And the tool informs what's the baseline emissions for 1 year, for the total duration of the project operation, of the lifetime of the asset funded, the emission reduction achieved by the component of that project credit operation, and also includes the abatement costs for each reduce or remove greenhouse gas emission. And some visuals of the information also delivered by the tool, graphics of the greenhouse gas emissions during the construction phase, greenhouse gas emissions during the operation, and so on. And the final carbon balance, well, we have at the beginning of the operation, the years of the construction, basically greenhouse gas emissions, but later greenhouse gas emission reductions. And those greenhouse gas emission reductions are the ones informed by the bank as the climate action impact resulting from the funds to each of the components participating in that credit operation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Perfectly on time. Good job. Thank you so much. So we have open now the floor for your questions. I saw a lot of you have written down a lot of notes. So yeah, looking forward to your questions. Who wants to address any questions of the 5 panelists? Yes, Francesca, we start here. Do you have a microphone? Yes, you maybe can. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. It was a really fruitful discussion. I will have many questions, but in the interest of time, I will just select one. 2 of you, one from Carbo and the guys from CAF mentioned carbon markets and carbon credits. So the question is, when it comes to GHG accounting and carbon credits, what's your approach dealing with those projects that are actually selling carbon credits? Do you deduct the GHG emissions claimed by these projects from your emissions reduction claims, or do you allow them to be sold while you are in the investments or in the funding during the implementation? And that's the first part of the question. Second part of the question is the same, but on the opposite side, how do you treat the carbon credits when you are actually buying them as an institution? So that's my question. Thanks.
Maybe we start with Evelyn, and because I think it was Kabe and Kaf, right? No.
Carbo?
Cabo? Cabo, sorry.
Because they
Then Juan,
mentioned
okay.
that,
Okay.
Yeah, well, I understand this is more a question for financial institutions because we are carbon developers. So, of course, if we add up everything we develop, over now 20 million emission reductions in the last 5 years, but this is a different question. I think it goes more for CAF or for your institution in Central America.
Okay, maybe I can start giving the CAF's approach in terms of offsetting the emissions of its internal operations. I mean, this is a process that we know we have to treat very carefully, to make sure that we actually get all of the information we can find about the projects. Like I was saying, we perform a due diligence in order to, find any positive or negative, feedback that, in the web or everywhere, especially for projects that might be controversial, because we know this is something that can, have an effect in our reputation. So that's why we also make sure that it aligns with the strategy of the organization. What are we really supporting in terms of sustainable development? And once we choose a project, we, of course, do all the administrative stuff. We make sure to have the certificates, that everything is it's very transparent, for our stakeholders to see, that we actually bought those credits and what they represent. And yeah, that will be from the internal side. I don't know if Christian wants to add something.
The assessment that we perform to the potential greenhouse gas emission reductions certified we are going to use for the compensation is very comprehensive. We have defined some criteria, location of the project, kind of the project, co-benefits additional to the greenhouse gas emission reduction, any controversy behind of the project, scope, and so on. And we finally decide what will be the best option that from the compensation of the internal carbon footprint. Externally, we haven't started with the compensation strategy. Until now, what we are doing is enabling conditions in our clients to include in the components of the credit operation that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, it's a road. We know will increase emissions in the project scenario. Okay, but you can include renewable energies, waste management, energy efficiency, and so on. And later, the idea is also offered to our clients. It can be at the beginning a non-reimbursable technical cooperation to compensate the carbon footprint, but we were waiting for an international standard. That's ISO 14068. Before we didn't feel comfortable with the approach followed by the companies because it was the PAS 2060 voluntary with some gaps in our understanding. Now with the ISO 14068, we consider that now we can boost the carbon neutrality into our operations and maybe also participate in projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We are participating in she says, what's the name of the kind of operation? In funds, investing in greenhouse gas emission reduction projects, for example, reforestation, renewable energy generation. And as part of that participation, we used our idea is use those carbon credits to compensate the greenhouse gas emission of our credit operations. Of course, providing the client with the funds and with the projects to by themselves compensate the carbon footprint. And that's more or less the idea. Of course, always looking for carbon credits coming from recognized greenhouse gas programs and with the most co-benefits additional to the greenhouse gas emission reduction.
Okay, thank you. Looking around, any other question? I think there should be definitely quite a few. Yes, please, over there.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Wonderful. The question I had was a very simple one. Your tool, does it come only in Spanish, Portuguese language, or does it come in other languages as well? English.
That's for me.
Yeah, that's for you.
CAF team.
Yeah.
And you mean the tool, the platform?
Yeah.
Well, up today is in Spanish, but in the upcoming months it will be in Portuguese and in English.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I forgot to mention that this is a tool, of course, property of CAF, but the idea is to allow the use of this tool to any, well, a stakeholder of the bank.
IDFC members.
There we go.
Yes. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. Any other question? You're looking around from the audience to the panelists. You can think a bit about make use of the opportunity at the moment that they're here. So we have maybe a question to Hani, because you were mentioning at the end you still have a lot of challenges, for example, right? So I think you mentioned quite a few. What would you wish, or what would you need? Have you did an assessment to what you need in order to cope with these challenges? Because I think similar challenges are also happening in other banks as well. So maybe we start here, and then I would take the word to someone else.
Yeah, thank you. So the first and the priority our challenge is about to integrate all the data in the system, because as I mentioned before that all the calculation done by the manual with the Excel and then we also have to make a lot of capacity building to our borrower or our debtors, since that the awareness of the GHG counting in several sectors in Indonesia is quite low. So it's kind of like our challenging for VTSMI to have a lot of capacity building, a lot of learning process for to our debtors or our borrowers, because it is very important for us to also calculate about the project, as the CAF mentioned, and it's very challenging because some actually VTSMI also finance the project for the local governments. So yeah, it's kind of very challenging for VTSMI how we can give a capacity building about this kind of GHG counting, since that there are a lack of this knowledge also. And yeah, this kind of so new for the local governments. It's different with the big companies. For example, several companies already aware about the GHG, and we also have their data, and then they also have an awareness to also have a public GHG counting publicly. So it is very easier for VTSMI to have it. So, but it's very in small portion of our borrower or our debtors. Thank you.
So wouldn't it be a possibility, you said, because now you're doing a lot of things manually. We have now heard about 3 different tools. Now we have one over there, IDFC. We have the KB tool software. We have the CAF software as well, which you just have presented. I think there are a lot of opportunities now to connect. But Mustafa, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, yes, of course.
Just to add also the IFD carbon tool, which is also used as basis for these 2 tools that were presented. No, I think that's what my question here is to all the colleagues about how the process of evaluating the carbon, the GHG accounting is done with the clients, in fact, with the customer, your partner, and how this process, are you involving the clients in the process? And also, since these calculations are made ex ante, do you have any ex post validation or counterfactual validation of the information that you have to increase your maybe your knowledge about the sectors and so on? So the question about first during the ex ante calculation and after that during ex post.
Before we answer, there's a direct.
If I could just complete
one more.
Just his question. Does the outcome of the measurement have an impact on the decision-making process, validating or financing a project?
Great addition. I would say we start with Evelyn this time.
Okay, thank you. Good questions. That's what I was mentioning, that we have developed the software and it's functioning, but we haven't put it in function yet because our normative, it's still trying to close the gaps so we can apply it properly. So for the ex-post evaluation, we use it for the impact report of ESG bonds, where we have a renewable energy project. So we fill in with information that comes from the supervision reports on how much electricity was produced, and then we introduce the activity data on the tool, and then we have the final result of how many tons of carbon dioxide were avoided with the project. And so that answers the first question of Mustafa. And the second one, I mentioned in my presentation that we are working on our climate change strategy, so the institutional one. So we have a goal there that before 2029, we will have a reductions goal, a target for reducing our emissions from the portfolio. So that one will come after we have been implementing and the functionality of neutral bank in our operations, and we can come with a target that it's feasible and that's doable, right? But that will come after we know how much are we emitting or avoiding from our portfolio investments. And it's kind of a tricky thing to do, because we were learning yesterday that for financial institutions, Scope 3 is the biggest source of emissions through the investments you make. And this tool, it's functional, its functionality, it's for projects. But we also have programs that are kind of tricky, because then you have many projects in there, and sometimes when you are on the ex-ante stage, you have not clarity of all the projects that can come in. So it's very difficult to have the GHG accounting for that type of financial instruments. And also when you have intermediary financial institutions working on, when you have a credit line. So we haven't figured that part yet. So it's very interesting to be sharing here with you experiences and knowledges from your side. So how much, and to learn how the IDFC carbon tool can include something about credit lines, and for some other financial instruments, how can we calculate GHG emissions? Because at this moment we have only figured out on the project side, but still we have to put it into our internal processes so we can fill in the information. And I was actually taking notes on how in this process we are in at this stage, we should have something in there for the environmental and social supervision, and also for the technical supervision, to have that input annually from the clients with all the information, so we can, because the software does the thing, but we have to put in the input, and how we can collect that input from the client. And so we have to put that in our policies so we can start applying it.
Colleagues from the CAF, Christian, you want to respond to this?
Yes,
because I think
thank you.
also directed, yeah.
I was preparing the response. Of course, the idea is involved along the process to the client, because the activity data belong to the client. It's quite complex at the beginning, because the client is thinking much more in the credit operation as a credit operation, not like a climate action operation, let's say. So we use them to use facilities. We have non-reimbursable technical cooperation for the preparation of studies, hiring consultants, maybe making the estimation of what could be the expected greenhouse gas emission reduction by the project. And during the administration, the idea is make follow-up to those results to confirm that effectively that those elements resulting in climate action are working properly, are real and are close, or if we have to update those results in our internal figures. Let's say a percentage of green funding provided by the bank, if we have to do them, because we are also aware that it implies the construction of internal capacity that will take time, and also make aware the client that before just environmental and social safeguards were the law, now the client also has to include climate action resulting of the credit operation. So that's the idea. Of course, we have to talk with them, explain them. We also have an internal goal of green funding 40%, and we have to achieve that goal. And because of that, we are working very hard, making awareness in our clients, creating the tool, and also providing additional resources, non-technical, non-reimbursable technical cooperation grants, yes, for them to prepare those studies and allow us to make the calculations.
Okay, good. I have a very, very last question, or if not, if there's no other question here in the audience. Yes, please. Yes, please, go ahead. Please, the microphone is over there.
Are there any KPIs for underwriting division for calculating a loss given default, probability of default, and pricing?
Do you want to direct this question to anyone, or anyone wants to respond to this question? Who wants? No?
Wasn't clear enough. If you can.
Underwriting division needs some information, KPIs, for defining pricing for new loan. And what kind of information they need for, let's say, results of tools?
Oh, you mean the KPIs for the impact reporting on the bonds?
No, let's say on the project level for new exposures.
Greenhouse gas emission reductions achieved by the project. That's the KPI.
Yes. Are they combining physical climate risk with this kind of risk, GHG emission?
I think it depends on the project. If it is a project that also has an adaptation component, you can add beneficiaries like communities that were removed from high-risk locations or vulnerabilities to climate change. And we do that, but through another tool that the bank has, which is our system for impact evaluation. So we also measure another kind of KPIs, not just tons of CO2, but also like beneficiaries, like renewable energies, installed capacities in gigawatts or megawatts. And we have a track of it at an ex-ante phase and an ex-post phase, but that's through another tool, not a GHG calculation tool.
Yes, it's also important to mention that to consider a credit operation as green not just implies greenhouse gas emission reduction, it means mitigation, but also adaptation, and in our case, protection and promotion of biodiversity. So the taxonomy we are following, quantitatively required to us to estimate the greenhouse gas emission reduction, but qualitative also implies to evaluate the co-benefits resulting from the project, adaptation and protection and promotion of biodiversity. And those topics, the experts, they know there are several KPIs to evaluate that. But also ensuring that any of the environmental impacts resulting from the operation will significantly affect one of the benefits. The case always discusses a road. Of course, it promotes connection, development of the region, but it has greenhouse gas emission reductions. Okay, let's evaluate if the greenhouse gas emissions, if the greenhouse gas emissions, because of the induced traffic, are affecting other of the components, adaptation, biodiversity, and so on. And the final assessment give us the decision of if we consider of not or not green funding the credit operation.
All right, thank you so much. I think looking also at the time, and we don't want to steal time of your well-deserved lunch break. I would like to really thank you, everyone, on the whole panel, the 5 of you. I think it's we notice that it's very important that we make the next steps in the carbon accounting. We have to learn from each other, as we have just seen. We have all challenges. I think all institutions have still challenges because there's quite some of uncertainty. So the exchanging this experience, I think, is a very crucial step forward. For example, to getting the right data to cope with uncertainty as well, and to cope with proxies, etc. So thank you very much for the whole panelists, for sharing your experience, your insights, and I think now we are going again as yesterday to the lunch, to the same venue. I think our colleagues, Ana Maria is already there with the sign, so please follow her. And then we meet here again at, I think, 1:30, right? 1:30, and then we will continue with some practical application. Thank you so much.